Good morning, everyone. How are you guys today?
Doing great. Thanks, Shar.
Good morning.
Happy September.
Happy September. How did that happen?
I have no idea, but I just had a deck built and there was this little brown leaf. Like the day I went out to look at it, there was this little brown yellow leaf in the middle of the deck. It was like, okay, it's time for winter. It's time for autumn.
Yeah, I know. It just seems like it came on so fast. Whoops, we got a little bit.
It's true. I went out. I'm already seeing the trees, the leaves on the trees starting to change in different areas, which I was just found surprising. I thought it was a little early, but yeah.
Well, isn't it earlier because we've had a little bit of a higher temperature time, or there's something going on?
I was thinking that too. I was just thinking that it's been like over 95 degrees for almost 2 weeks in Denver straight. And I don't think it even got down much below 75 at night, so it was weird to start seeing those yellow leaves come. I think that maybe the trees were like, uncle, like, send some cool weather here.
Yeah.
Crazy. So I was going to mention to you guys, I saw this email this morning from Eagle Hill Consulting that did a national or report. I don't know if they did it or reported on it. A national survey, employee burnout from COVID-19 is on the rise, with 58% of US workers reporting burnout. And so when asked about the causes, 47% attribute burnout to their workload. 39% say it's balancing work and personal life, which you can imagine with kids going back to school. That's got to be tough, right? Yeah. To try and figure out how to juggle all of that. And then it says, here's the thing that I think is so pertinent to what we talk about here in the forum. So 37% indicate it stems from a lack of communication, feedback, and support. And I really keyed in on that because I think that's so, I talk about it all the time with change, with big change in an organization, like that Cotter rule of you have to 10x communication, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
I think it's all about.
I think it's a matter of, traditional ways of communicating with your staff, with traditional emails and normal quote meetings and those standard protocols. I think it requires a bit of coaching aspect of really understanding how to coach. I think, Robert, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that a big part of it that I found is leaders being more and managers being more empathetic without trying to solve any problems, because you can't solve their problems, but just to listen and hear them and say, yeah, I know that must be really tough, goes a long way as well. And that's coaching, Shar. So.
Yes. Yeah, emotional intelligence is so key. It's interesting when I was working at a corporate arena, we were trying to look at ways of doing empathetic or EQ training. And at the time, it was more of okay, this is a training process and how can we change that behavior? But today, I think it's even more relevant than it was years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sumit, you were going to mention?
Do you think, yes, absolutely. Thanks, Shar. I was going to say that, don't you think it's also a discipline issue from both sides? So technically, by being at home, I'm just 10 seconds away from my laptop. So for a manager to say that I need this done urgently, you're not spending time commuting at all, why don't you spend it at work? And also for an employee, especially for somebody who's a high achiever, to be willing to step up and say, I'm at home, might as well spend an extra 15 minutes or compromise on a bit of sleep before I send out this mail. I think that's also contributing to the problem. So a lack of discipline from both parties.
That's right, those boundaries. And I think that's so true, Sumit. And on the other side of it, there's, I think, also once, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And if I were in the workplace, I'd have to you're surrounded by the people that are helping you feel uncomfortable, And so you sort of have to, there's a lot more visibility of having to work those things out. Whereas with Zoom, you just shut off and walk away, and you can just go take a walk outside or have a glass of wine or whatever.
Right,
You know,
right.
there's this kind of like, boom, just shut it off. But that doesn't really shut off the feelings, does it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of concerning though. I feel I've read that and felt, you know, that I think there's a real role for leaders right now in lieu of this that maybe hasn't been well articulated by, because we're all in this, it's so new, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe even if, you know, there's some managers who've worked virtually for years. So it's not, you know, completely new, but just the whole scale of it is so
I think
new.
the big thing about going back to empathy again is that all of a sudden we have parents that are now being called to be school teachers,
Yeah.
and babysitters, and tutors, and their spouses are home working, and maybe they don't live in a big house. Maybe the internet isn't very good. You know,
Right.
all these things together create a lot of stress on
Yeah.
people. And then managers might be putting a lot of pressure on people to perform at a higher level. Even though, because they don't know what's going on. Maybe some of them are used to being in the office all the
Yeah.
time. So it's a difficult thing that leaders need, and we have the ability to coach and develop leaders to incorporate a lot of these areas, to create that environment. So
Right.
I know people right now, they're trying to work. They don't even have an office at home. They're at the dining room table. Their kids are running around. The dog is barking. In fact, last night I was watching a recording from a news station, and one of the primary hosts, all of a sudden a dog was barking in the background. And you couldn't tell, but she couldn't tell that she was broadcasting from home. She said, "This is the first time this has happened since we moved to home." But that's just indicative of what people are going through.
Right. Yeah, I've spoken to people that they're actually planning on moving, or they're I mean, a lot of people are moving out of the cities because of the pandemic. Of course,
Yep.
we've heard that, but a lot of people I've been talking to are moving because their house is not suitable enough for remote work, and so
Yeah.
they're going to a bigger place. And it's like, yeah, and you can tell every you're on the call with them, and they have their spouse right next to them, and they have the kids doing homework in the background, and they just need more space. So
Yeah.
One of my best friends is a realtor here in Denver, and she said that she's like the whole exodus out of the central part of Denver in every direction is huge right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to mention that's kind of cool about the schooling thing, and I know we're going to start here in just a minute, but my son lives in Portland, Oregon. He graduated from college a year ago, and he's wanting to explore the teaching path. And he got hired to be he's not a certified teacher. So he isn't hired as a teacher, right, in the school system, but he got hired by a movement that's been growing in Portland called micro schools, which is where families are banding together and creating little collaboration pods. And then they hire someone like my son, who's essentially a really good tutor, especially in math and some of those harder subjects, that I've said before, once my kids got to letters on their math, I was out. I couldn't help you anymore. If there's letters involved.
Lisa, to that point, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but my daughter just started a job yesterday with 4 families.
Okay. Yeah.
And, they're wealthy families, and they're paying her a lot of money as a college graduate to in her kindergarten kids. So to be
run
there
the school,
kids,
right? So they can work,
so they can work. And she got hooked up with them by a woman who had a babysitting referral business, and then just took on this like crazy. It's charging anywhere from $700 to $1,000 to match them with somebody who can lead a pod. So
yeah, it's a new world for sure. Well, it's 10 o'clock on the dot. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly People Strategies Forum, where every Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning Mountain Time, we discuss actionable and innovative ways to engage and lead people. My name is Lisa Jackson. I'm going to be your forum host just for today. And as a culture expert, since 2000, I've been guiding leaders on fueling positive change and profitable growth by placing people at the center of their company. As I like to say, a strong balance sheet and strategy are mile markers toward a vision, but culture is your immune system. Really your only true remedy against the unpredictable forces of change. And that's what we spend a lot of time talking about here in the forum. Please welcome my co-host, Shar Miller, co-owner of Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, and as well as career coaching through HR with a Heart. And last but not least, my fearless partner in the TMA method. We are reinventing talent strategy with data-driven matching of people to perfect fit roles. Sumit Singla, a people and change consultant in India. Sumit is the brainchild behind the amazing visual content that for our cause, as well as moderating our chat. I'm really excited about today's topics. Sam Reeve, our Fearless Forum leader, is the CEO and founder of Comp Team, helping organizations attract and retain committed people through innovative reward and recognition strategies. He's going to talk to us today about team compensation strategies, introduce some creative thoughts on that front. And welcome please to our guest host, our speaker today, Robert Grossman, a good friend and colleague of mine. Robert is a Black Diamond Leadership. Yes, he has skied Black Diamond Hills. We were just talking about that. He's also a national management training and executive coaching agency that works with individuals, organizations, and teams to drive peak performance and profitability. If you haven't yet attended our forum, we thrive here on actionable tips and discussion-based formats. So please put your comments in the chat. There'll be a lot of good dialogue happening there. And I think that's what I've got to say. Let's just do this. Sam, are you ready?
Sounds good. Sounds good. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about motivating teams with rewards. And we're gonna go through a couple aspects. Just a standard motivational speak that you typically hear as far as intrinsic and extrinsic. But before I get there, I want to pull this concept why we invest in employees, and this is something I like to reiterate a lot, is the service profit chain. This is something that came out from Harvard Business School by Heskett in several years back now, but it really is the foundation of why we invest in our coworkers. And so as the part of this graphic here, for a company to really thrive and as a company and grow, they need to invest in their coworkers, because basically what happens there is they further invest in their products and services and how they interact with customers, creating more customer loyalty and as a result, greater profit for the company. And so this is the foundation of why we do what we do, and making sure that we're continually driving value to our employees, our coworkers, our workforce, so that they continually drive value to our customers and keep this engine running. So a big piece of what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about understanding your team. And the reason for this is to understand the types of team and what types of motivations are going to work for them, or incentives. And so we're going to go through the right motivational mix as part of that discussion. We're going to be talking about bringing the right people together, and then and finally discuss these avoiding the pitfalls that we typically see in team rewards and incentives that are out there. First of all, let's start with just the basics here. Now, we've all heard about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? So intrinsic motivation is that internal desire for happiness. I mean, we all start in our lives, and we want to focus on something that really makes a difference for us, what we're really good at, things that make us happy, what we believe in, or that's aligned with our personal values. And so this is a very important driving force in what we're looking for in our workforce and selecting teams and the right people on those teams. Now, the other part of that is the extrinsic motivation, and this is a lot where we create pay and reward programs and incentives that drive and focus behavior. Now, a lot of the dialogue over the past 7 years has been, I think that it was and we were talking about this the other day, Sumit, right? The Daniel Pink's book about motivation, and and Daniel Pink, and as well as Simon Sinek and other authors out there, really hang their hat on the intrinsic motivation piece, which is very important, of course, but we need to realize that not all jobs are created equal. When we're thinking about motivation in intrinsic versus extrinsic, there are some jobs that have a greater portion of their motivation that comes from extrinsic focus or forces, and some that are more intrinsically motivated. So let's look at some of those now as we're thinking, what are those jobs, right? And
Sam, I'm sorry. I just had a point here that I think a lot of people fall into the trap of making it an either or kind of a situation and saying that if we can get intrinsic motivation enabled, we don't need extrinsic, or vice versa. But I just like to use the example of a sports team. So as a star player, you definitely have that desire, that hunger to win. You'd want to play for a winning team. You'd want to contribute to a winning cause. And no matter what you've paid, you'll feel like a failure if your team's not winning week in, week out. But at the same time, you also simply winning week after week doesn't pay the bills. So you would expect to have some kind of a bonus written into your clause saying, if we win the championship this year, this is the extra amount that I expect to earn. So, I mean, I think that kind of sums it up for me, that if you're really an A player, you would thrive on intrinsic and extrinsic both, and a reward or an incentive would kind of act as a nudge to adapt your behavior in the right direction.
absolutely. I think the big thing, Simon Sinek talks about it in his recent book, The Infinite Game. And he's talking about the infinite mindset versus the finite mindset. And he uses that sport analogy as well. And so the infinite mindset, of course, is more intrinsically motivated. It's that we're in business for that. I'm doing what I'm doing because I love this. I want to serve the customer. I want to have that long-term vision. But when it's just like that you would do in your sport, if you're playing baseball or football, it's like you love the sport, and we do it for free in a lot of times, right? Because we love the sport. But when we're in that game, in the heat of the moment, when our blood is pumping and we're rooting for the scoreboard, that is that finite thinking, and it also plays a part in our success, and it also gets us excited, and part of that passion. And it drives behavior in that moment, and it does the same in the workplace. But the big question a lot of times is that, do we want to drive certain types of behavior? So that extrinsic motivation is really that piece that, and this is I'm kind of cutting to the chase on my next slide here, but is the piece that really drives that drives that focus. So if we look at that mix, the motivational mix here, as we're talking about, intrinsic motivation is really the base. And for us to do good at any particular job for any period of time, for a long period of time, we need to have passion in what we're doing. If we're in a job where we're just putting that nut on the bolt, and we're doing that over and over again, pretty soon we're like, oh no, that's kind of, we're not getting much out of that. So we really have to have a passion for what we're doing. And the next piece that reinforces that is that recognition from others, from peers, from the company, from our manager, from our our spouse, our family, that, hey, you're on the right track. We like what you're doing. Great work. That kind of stuff is the piece that reinforces that we're not alone in our intrinsic motivation. I in fact am being recognized by those that I care about around me, that, hey, this is something that really is a passion, and I'm making a difference. And then we use the extrinsic motivation to drive that focus and passion. And this can be done in like I said here, in games and in challenges, simple challenges, or we can do it in actual cash or non-cash means. But what I mentioned there is non-cash. Just because it's extrinsically motivated doesn't mean that it needs to be delivered in cash. Matter of fact, cash is kind of like the easy way out. You know, it's like going to Christmas and buying your loved one a gift card and say, here you go. You know, it's not meaningful. It's easily forgotten, and it may be gives a lot of flexibility for what they can do with it. But it doesn't necessarily align if you're operating as a business. It doesn't align that person any further to how they can achieve in the organization. So
Actually,
an example.
Sam, when they've interviewed and done research on this, they really found that compensation is kind of low on what they're looking for. They want to have value. They want to be, have a voice.
Yeah.
The company is more important to many people than cash.
That's right. It is, and it's contradictory because when we think about, okay, when I'm going to go to work at a place, the first thing you're thinking about is money, right? Because geez, you got to make a living. I got bills to pay. I got to pay for my kids' college. I got that. So that has to be at a certain level, a competitive level, for you to feel like that, this is meeting my needs and this is fair. But beyond that, cash is not the best vehicle for a lot of motivational factors. Matter of fact, if you think about team motivation, and we're going to get this a little bit more detail, we're thinking about not about personal achievement, but what the team can achieve together. And so we're thinking about, okay, what is the project outcome? I mean, what is the product that we're trying to create? What is the service that we're trying to provide as a group? Not based on how much revenue I can generate or how much profit I can deliver to the company or expenses I can save. That's a different a bit of a feeling. So in team-based awards, we need to take a different scope, and we'll go through that in a little bit more. But when we're talking about non-cash motivation, instead of just having a cash payout, what you can do as part of team extrinsic motivation is, for example, something that's aligned with the company that's going to further deliver a positive message. And a great example that was used before the pandemic, and hopefully this will come back, is maybe giving the opportunity that if the team makes they deliver that product, they get that customer satisfaction that they're trying to achieve, that they have the opportunity to perhaps go to additional training as a team, or go to a conference as a team, maybe, some glamorous offsite area, Florida, or, outside the country. And then, and you can also do that at certain levels. So for instance, at the first threshold level, when they make that goal, they can go there as part of the team. So just the team goes. But if you really hit it out of the ballpark, maybe the next level is that, hey, I get to take my spouse, and then maybe the next level above that is, hey, maybe I get to take my spouse and we get to stay the weekend, So you can even these type of non-cash rewards or experiential type of rewards can be brought up in tiers, and so that it's even more motivational and so forth. The next best thing about these type of rewards as well is that they're not easily forgotten. They're a piece that becomes part of your memory and part of your family's memory if they get involved as well. That you went to this event, you learned these things, you experienced that, and it's not easily forgotten. So that's one great benefit over cash. So just back, I kind of skipped over this real quick, and I just wanted to show you these different types of jobs that are more extrinsically motivated and more intrinsically motivated. But it's interesting in how we look at how incentives are typically put in these categories. The more intrinsically motivated type of roles are more likely to have team incentives, more fixed pay, less variable pay. So something to keep in mind there. Now the next thing I wanted to talk about is selecting the right people. So that when we're talking about this bottom tier, the intrinsic motivational factors, the big thing that we're really want to drive here is ensuring that we're bringing the right people together to get our highest degree of motivation out of this. So the big thing here that we're trying to do, and this is part of the TMA method as well, is ensuring that we have people that fit each one of these categories. Now, this is a particular learning style that we're talking about here. So structured learning, theoretical, creative, and practical. Now, what happens is if we have arrange our teams to where people have a preference or a learning preference on each one of these areas, such as we have let's say 4 people. One is each one of this. We have one person that's theoretical, one person that's structured, one person that's practical, one person that's creative, and that's the way that they think and they love to learn. When we pair up these people, such as mentors or are part of team, they learn and they reflect on one another and they stretch each other. So, for instance, if we're going to on this team, if we're going to have a mentor or mentee relationship, it would be good to have a structured person pair up with a theoretical person, or a structured person pair up with a practical person, based on their learning preference, which is in the TMA method is shown by this little blue dot here on this grid. And so what that does is it helps those people relate to one another a little bit more. They share ideas and they can grow. And there's a lot of things that can be done out of this as far as team effectiveness. I mean, in any situation, when we're looking at motivating teams, we need to make sure that there's first, of course, the basic structure of having goals and priorities set effectively. And then, of course, we need to ensure that the work is allocated fairly among the team. These are the basics that are necessary to make sure that there's motivation. And then next is to ensure that there's standard processes that are shared among the team, so everybody has an expectation of how things get done. And then most importantly is that there's a good relationship among team members. And when we're looking at their particular work style and from the TMA method and pairing up teams like this that we showed in this methodology, you're going to have more chances of a high performing team. So the next thing is, okay, well, a lot of times when we're thinking about, team incentives is, how do we make sure that everybody is pulling their own weight? And that's a big concern in a lot of companies. And there's a lot of good ways of doing that now, especially with modern technology that we have. It's very easy to do somewhat of a 360-degree assessment. And the important part of these assessments is that they need to be made in a team environment in a positive sense, that we're asking positive questions as part of that assessment, such as an example would be, asking a particular person, what team members enable you to do your best work. So if we ask this question as part of that 360, then it puts a positive image in a person's mind where they're more apt to recognize those on their team that really help them out, and keeping this as a positive thing. Now, of course, when we collect as a manager that's running this 360, as you collect all your assessment and feedback, it becomes pretty easy to point out a person that may not be giving influence to others or helping the team grow or is thought as a contributor. So we don't have to go to the negative side and just ask, okay, well, who's not pulling their weight in the team? We don't need to go in that direction. We can keep it positive. So the next thing, oh, hey, Shar.
Hi. I just want to say a couple things I was going to mention. In my own company, we really have applied this process, really analyzing the talents, the strengths, the drives of our employees, analyzing if they're theoretical or creative, practical or structured. And we've been doing a lot of pairing up, and it's made a tremendous difference. Pairing up and creating that coaching culture and acknowledging the different strengths and different type of people, different aspects and having them work together. So it does take some creative scheduling. But the good news is when we did the TMA method, we were able to do a report and analyze those differences and then apply it actually on the workforce. So I think that's a really good concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Susan just asked, what tools are we using to identify team roles? And that and perhaps the TMA method does have a tool where we could, it tells us how to find the best types of competencies and people to be involved in a team. And then roles can be defined on that based on need. I mean, of course, when we're looking at a particular team, they're put together for certain purposes, such as we look at these different team types. There's like a process team is probably the most familiar that we know of as a team, and they're put together for a particular purpose that's long term, and they do over and over again, and they may have certain requirements or expertise that are needed, or roles. And then we have parallel teams, which are typically brought together for a specific purpose. So it's a part-time group. So they come in and they step in, step out, go back to what they typically do on a regular basis, and maybe they're just meeting, once a month or once a week. And then there's project teams that are created for a special purpose, and then hybrid teams that are kind of a variety of them, of all of them. So the types of incentives that are used for each one of these would be different. Now, a process team, we're thinking about, okay, well, what type of work are they doing? Is it intrinsic or is it extrinsically motivated? And then we got to think about the types of rewards that are necessary for that. But other types of teams, if they're part-time, like a parallel team, those types of teams are better with recognition and maybe some spot awards, something to give them encouragement to complete a particular project, and those are typically more bonus elemented. So they're not expecting it. It's not like an incentive. It's like, hey, you did a great job. The team earns this reward, or you did a great job. Here's the recognition. So that's really drives those parallel and actually project teams too. But project teams, they can have, there can be driven more cash, and a kind of a cash spot award would be okay for this type of thing, for getting a recognizing a project that's been completed, such as we got that piece to market. That could be a way you can send that with a cash award, or also non-cash as well. But that's a place where we can use those primary vehicles. And a hybrid, of course, is going to be a mix. That can be a mix of cash or recognition and so forth. But typically, when that's the first step when we're thinking about the right vehicle, is understanding, what kind of team we have.
So I have a question for you, Sam. In one of my work settings, when we did orientation, we actually handed out kind of a survey at the time of hire of how you like to be recognized. And it was beyond just, compensation. It talked about, do you like flowers on your desk? Do you like to have organizational outings? Do you like to be recognized in front of a group? Just all these different things that people, or do you like to have maybe free maid service or dry cleaning? Mm-hmm. And so what are your thoughts about doing those types of surveys so that people could tell you how they really want to be recognized as a team or as an individual?
Yeah, I think that it's a great idea to have that as a team activity where you can get to learn. When everybody hates it, we're thinking, oh, gee, an icebreaker, come on, it's like,
yeah.
But the important thing is that we do know a little bit about each other. I mean, as we're, for instance, as we just got introduced to Robert today, I mean, I connected with Robert because he's a former ski patroller, and I'm a ski patroller. And so it's like, we have that in common. And so, and it brings a linkage. And so the more that we know about each of our team members there, the more cohesive that we are, the more that we can relate to one another and understand what our likes and dislikes are. And that's simply just having a conversation. And by knowing this, we can have more impact on giving incentives that really make a difference and people value. And so that's critically important.
Yeah, that's interesting because I worked with Vail Resorts for a little bit as an interim director of HR. And it was interesting because they wanted time on the slopes. That was their reward.
Yeah.
You know, you work so many hours a day and then you get time on the slopes.
That's right.
Sam, I know that you're kind of getting close to the end here, but I wanted to just ask for Susan, what tools are you using to help identify the team roles, like individual tools such as DISC, Myers-Briggs, communication styles inventory? Do you have a specific kind of approach that you like to use on that front?
Yeah, so those,
yeah, go ahead.
so any of those tools can help determine, work styles or behavioral styles in the workplace. Now, the one thing, of course, we are, TMA is my favorite there because it focuses on competencies.
Right.
And the important part about the competency development is that we can use that to identify, what does each job need? I mean, so if we're looking at a role of a team, we're going to need certain competencies to like roll out a product, for instance, or to provide a service. So the first thing we do is identify what those competencies are. And then we can put our team members together based on their behavioral styles of how they like to work together in the work environment that works best for them. And then also the competencies they bring to the table. So with those two pieces, that we can ensure that we have a high performing team.
Do you ever ask the members to evaluate to sort of offer recommendations on rewards that would be meaningful to them? Do they get input on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so right now there's a big trend towards personalized rewards, and that can be more expensive to administer for a lot of companies. But the amount of motivation you get out of those type of things is huge. Now, I didn't get into this, but one of the biggest problems about cash is that it's with cash rewards, it's very easy to create unrealistic expectations. For instance, in a good year, of course, we can deliver a huge cash award, which and I don't know what you guys do when you get a big bonus or part of you, if you get a couple of big bonuses year after year, it has the habit of changing your lifestyle. Maybe you'll get that nicer car or that bigger house, or maybe you'll adopt some more amenities in your life. Well, that's all fine and dandy until you have a couple bad years or COVID hits, and then all of a sudden, geez, it's like I got to pay for this house. I mean, that's part of the news that just came out today is from some people because of their loss of jobs, they can't pay their mortgage. And so what would be more responsible as a company is to make sure that people are paid at a fair level, and then to provide other types of amenities through their experiential amenities. So if they, we're all in part of this sharing economy. So it'd be great to get a little bit more creative with rewards, such as, providing what do they call it, blue apron. If a person, if a person's traveling, perhaps have blue apron as something that's sent to their home, which is a meal service, so that they don't have to cook, or if there's late hours. I mean, you can provide these more of luxury experiences for your employees, so that it doesn't impact them when there's a bad year. It's like if you take away a luxury experience that's an award from a company, it's not hitting a person's disposable income or their cash that they have. So it's a much better experience overall.
Terry's saying that sometimes these they do become entitlements.
Yeah.
And the receiver, I see that all the time as well. And it's interesting because if you go to the other end of the continuum on the recognition part, and really the kudos and the making people feel good and giving that specific concrete feedback, and people are like, show me the money. So
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and if you ever ask, I mean, of course, I mean, if you ever ask, it's like, do you want Blue Apron or do you want, $10,000 bonus? And people are like, going, well, geez, I'll take the $10,000. I'll buy my own Blue Apron or whatever, So
Right.
that's always the, that's always the answer. But it's not what really drives happiness at work and motivation. So
Yeah.
great.
True.
Well, I
Yeah.
know we've gone through a lot here. And I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for other topics. So I'm going to go ahead and Robert, I want to turn things over to you and get your perspective. Oh, we're on mute, Robert.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now.
Psychological safety. Yay.
Yay. Just a double check. You guys seeing my screen?
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you, Sam and Lisa and Shar for having me on this call today. It's a very exciting topic. And yes, Sam, we did connect on about ski patrol, and people always ask me, how did I come up with Black Diamond leadership? And there's really two reasons, and one was the overriding reason. But yes, I'm very passionate about skiing, and I've been skiing since I was 6 years old and 15 years on a ski patrol. But the real truth is Black Diamond Leadership was available as a URL. So that became the name of the company. I want to kick off by sharing a recent story, example of psychological safety and the impact on a team. I'm the president of a nonprofit board. And last week we had a board meeting and we were discussing when we'll be able to go to in-person events. And one of the board members raised his hand and said, well, if we go to in-person events, we really have to manage face masks and that kind of stuff. Well, another board member went off the rails and started swearing. He was obviously very passionate about this issue. And interaction went on for a little bit. People were shocked. People were arguing. I had to stop the meeting and get us back on track again. And when the meeting was over, I thought, okay, well, it was just somebody being very passionate and we'll move forward. Well, 2 days later, I started getting emails from board members that they don't feel safe, that they don't want to be on the board anymore, that they won't be on the board next year if this person continues on the board. And it was like, wow, because of this one person, we created a psychologically unsafe environment. And the ramifications of that were people were afraid to share their thoughts, share their opinions, contradict somebody, or challenge somebody. And so we're going to be giving that board an assessment that I'm going to show you in a minute here, and then working on it, reestablishing that trust again. Now, the one thing we did do is that particular board member did take on calling every board member personally and having a conversation and owning what he did was inappropriate and building back that safety on that board. So how did I become a psychological safety coach? Well, I was honored to be part of a cohort of 18 people, and that's me in the back with the blue arrow. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm not about 5'10", I'm 6'5". So the people around me were on chairs. So that's the back. And we spent a week together in Vancouver, Canada, going through psychological safety. And the work that we did, and actually the organization that we're part of, was founded by Amy Edmondson, who is a professor of leadership and management at Harvard Business School. One of her many books is called The Fearless Organization, and the subtext and subtype, if you can't read it, is creating a psychological safety in the workforce for learning, innovation, and growth. Before I go on, I forgot to mention, please, if you have questions, ask your questions at any time. Okay, I'm happy to stop and address any questions. All right, so what is psychological safety? It's a big field, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to define it as that a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. More specifically, it's when people have psychological safety, they feel comfortable to contribute, to share, to take risks without any fear of retribution or embarrassment or being demoted. That includes any team member even challenging the manager or the leader of that particular team. So in order to create a high performance team, psychological safety and other components must be in place. So first, we're just going to do a quick definition in my world what a high performance team is. It's
Robert, just a
yes.
quick thought that I wanted to interject here
Sure.
about that. And I think I assume you're going to talk about this, but in that feel comfortable to be oneself, there are a lot of people in teams who are introverted, who are not the kind of person that's just naturally going to challenge. So is that accounted for in this, in terms of how, you know, when I feel safe, I'm always the person that's going to raise my hand and speak up, but there's the other
Right.
person who's thinking things. And does this kind of environment level the playing field for the brain?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, it does, especially if the leader understands the dynamics of psychological safety and engages those people, you know. But also that leader needs to be sensitive that that person might not want to share in a public environment,
Right.
because they're introverted. So to create, again, a vehicle for them,
A vehicle,
right,
a
is
process
important.
by which they can be heard. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But I would assume that, I would imagine that once you start creating a safe environment like that, even those introverts might be willing to raise their hand more. Because we're going to talk about this in a few moments, but psychological safety on a team is really about value creation as well as avoiding risk on your team as well. So good. So move on, Lisa. Okay. So what are the building blocks for achieving a high performance team? So trust is the foundation of everything. Trust has to be there on a team in order to achieve high performance. Leaders and team members must be developed in self-mastery or emotional intelligence. Leaders and team members need to be trained and developed in having critical conversations. And Shar, this is to your point, the coaching conversation that leaders must be developed in. Then we must have psychological safety on the team, and then we develop leaders to be aware of psychological safety. The important thing to note is that all these components must be present, and without, if one of them is missing, it won't work as effectively. So we have to look at all these different areas in order to create that high performance team. So why is this important? Well, just a couple quick stats from Gallup in 2017. They surveyed the American workforce and they found that only 3 in 10 employees strongly agree with the statement that their opinions count at work. 3 in 10 only. That's not good. They did extrapolate that if you could move it to 6 in 10, then organizations will realize a 20% lower reduction in turnover, lower absenteeism, a reduction in safety incidences, increased productivity, and actually higher profitability. So I'll pause for a moment if any questions out there.
There's, we're good. You can keep going. Yeah.
Okay, great. So one of the things that's changed a lot recently and really brings the high performance team structure or philosophy or culture and psychological safety to bear is that we now spend 50% more time collaborating than we did just 20 years ago. 50% more time working together. You know, before, especially during the Industrial Revolution, everything was standardized. There was one way. You came in, you did your job. You didn't look outside your role. You just did it. You know, stamp, 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 whatever it is. And now that has changed dramatically because now we're all knowledge workers. We have to collaborate with other team members, not only on our team, but also on other teams as well. Collaboration is key in order to improve value creation and reduce all the things that we talked about in the slide previously. So psychological safety is important because it really is the biggest predictor of team effectiveness in the face of change. And this actually came out of Google, which we're going to quote some Google studies from Aristotle in a few minutes. So how does psychological safety drive value and innovation? Well, some of you know, we live in a VUCA world where we're volatile, uncertain, is complex and ambiguous. And the challenge that we're facing as people who manage talent and work with talent is that human adaptability is not keeping up with innovation. So there's this gap where we're developing new products, new services, new technology, whatever it might be. So that's where the teamwork environment comes into play, where people bring their expertise to bear on a team. It also is about innovation and value creation. And I put these two companies up here for a reason. When I ask most people, why do you think Netflix took over from Blockbuster? They cite all the wonderful things about, it's streaming, it's this, it's convenient, it's that, everything like that. Netflix really came out because their team recognized that what people really hated was paying late fees. And Blockbuster, I remember, 9 o'clock at night, running down to the video store to make sure my video got in that slot before 10 o'clock, whatever time it was, where I would be charged late fees. And most people don't remember that when Netflix first came out, they weren't streaming. They were sending you DVDs. And their thing was, you can keep a DVD for as long as you want. And when you're ready to send it back, we'll send you the next DVD on your list. So they just completely wiped out late fees. So without psychological safety on a team, fear crushes innovation. And here's a little chart that leadership without psychological safety tend to be controlling, decisions are top down, and it can create a toxic environment. When a team has psychological safety, it's very inquiring, bottom up, and they focus on the mission of that team within the mission of the organization. Employees comply, hide mistakes, maintain their reputation, where with psychological safety, they challenge ideas, learn from mistakes, and serve the mission. I want to talk about this for a moment and bring in Amy Edmondson and a study that she did. She had a premise that a low-performing team would have a much higher rate of mistakes and instances and things like that, and high-performing teams would have a much lower rate or reporting of instances. When she did the study, it was opposite, and she didn't understand what was going on. So I'm going to ask a question to the audience right now. Why do you think, what she found, sorry, let me say what she found, be very clear about this. What she found was that the low-performing team had a very low reporting rate of mistakes and instances, where the high-performing team had a much higher rate of reporting. So let's ask the audience if anybody has an idea why this is so.
So what my guess is, Robert, is that those teams that have greater psychological safety are often more innovative, and they come up with new solutions or new things to try. And so there can be greater errors, but there's also greater innovation. That's true. But what she found in the study, though, was that the low-performing teams were hiding their mistakes. They were sweeping everything under the carpet. They were not
Patty
reporting.
just said about that. She just said it was safe for those individuals to say what was true.
Right. Where the high-performing team, they knew that if they made a mistake, they could report it immediately. They could take corrective action immediately. That's the real reason why. That's not the main reason. Not the only reason, but the main reason why she came up with that study, which shocked her. So it just leads again towards creating a psychological safety environment. People will report, they will come up with ideas, they will fix things very rapidly. And then again, innovation is stifled by the need to preserve status quo. And under a high performance team with psychological safety, everyone's encouraged to adapt and try new solutions. I was just reading a story about Pixar, that they would give a team to develop a new property upwards of 2 to 3 years to develop a property before they would cut it off. And they encouraged people to take risks and to think outside the box. And in fact, they would actually remove somebody from a team if they weren't willing to do that. That's how committed they were to innovation. So to embrace change, people need to feel safe and take risks. to challenge the status quo. Let's jump on the opposite side. What is the impact when psychological safety is not present? So I've got a couple quick case studies here. So in March 1977, 2 jumbo jets collided and burst into flames, and 583 people died in that accident. It was the worst aviation accident in history. So let's look at what went wrong and what led to this accident happening. So it was at a very small airport, in fact, with one runway. It was fogged in, and you had a KLM plane who was getting ready to roll and take off, and a Pan Am flight that had just landed that was still taxiing. So when the KLM pilot was actually one of their very top pilots. In fact, he was accountable to certify all 747 pilots every 6 months to make sure that they were able to fly that plane safely. So when he got into taxi position, he put the throttles forward and started to roll. And his first officer said, "Captain, we don't have clearance." And so a little bit annoyed, the captain said, "Okay, get clearance." So he radioed air traffic controllers, ATC, and ATC said, "Stand, don't roll," and was trying to get a hold of what's going on with Pan Am. Well, more conversations occurred, and then the pilot said, "We're going," right? Without ATC clearance, "We're going." He rolled and started taking off, and the first officer, and you can hear the recorded message, first officer and the flight engineer both said, "We don't have clearance." And the captain said, "I don't care." And after that, they didn't talk anymore. By the time they got down to the runway and they could see, got to a certain point, they could see the Pan Am plane was still on the runway, and they tried to take off, and they could not get enough altitude. They struck the plane. The KLM flight stalled, crashed, and everybody burned and died in that flight.
Gosh.
So what came out of this was that both the first officer and the flight engineer, I'm sorry, I'm so used to not thinking about flight engineers anymore. They don't exist. Back then they did. They both were silent, even though they knew that possibly their lives were at risk.
Wow.
So it's changed all the protocols within the cockpit now. Both first office captain and co-pilot, or whatever they're called now, they both must agree in order to take off or do anything really these days. So that's one example. In the medical space, there is an example of we call this unconscious. Sorry, let me go back and just state that this is what was not said. This one is unconscious calculators. So this is a NICU unit at a hospital. A new infant came in, was premature. The NICU nurse was taking care of the child, getting him ready in the incubator and whatnot. The doctor walked up, looked at the chart, and then checked something off and turned around and started to walk away. And the nurse wanted to say something to him because there's a certain medication that they give to premature babies to help their lungs develop. But the nurse in that moment made an unconscious calculation to not say anything. In her mind, she said, "Well, the doctor knows best, I'm just a nurse," right? Well, afterwards, when they interviewed her further, she admitted that she had seen the doctor in the past dress down other nurses for challenging his orders or asking questions. So she made a unconscious calculation to be safe and not say anything. Now, the good news is the story worked out fine, the baby was fine. But if you were to turn this into a more psychologically safe environment, the doctor would have welcomed the feedback from the nurse. Maybe the doctor would explain why he didn't prescribe that particular medication, right? And they would have that more symbiotic or collaboration between doctor and really the people that are administering most of the care.
I think if anybody in this forum today works in healthcare, they understand what a huge risk that is for nurses still.
Yep.
To this day. And I think that this comes down to this real mindset that leaders feel like they have to have the answer. And if I've literally coached leaders who at the C-level of organizations who are like, in private, they'll say, if that's not my job to have the answer and have the right answer, what value do I provide?
Right.
there's still a very pervasive mindset, and a lot of leaders can even really name that. I mean, in, you know, medical school, you're trained to have the answer.
Right, right,
And no one is supposed to question you, right?
right, right. Exactly, exactly. Yeah. Now, there's times when the doctor must take control, right? And in an emergency situation or whatnot, where that somebody has to manage that team and everybody make sure they get that outcome. But even there, somebody could ask a question, right? So Thomas Edison, by the way, is a great example of this, that I don't think Thomas Edison even completed high school, but he knew, he had the vision that an incandescent light bulb needed to be created. So he surrounded himself with people a lot smarter than him. But he led the vision, and he helped the team work together, and he broke down the barriers that the team may have come up against in order to develop this. Right? And
Yeah, that's a really cool example, because there were 3 people before him that actually had versions of the incandescent light bulb starting as early as 75 or 80 years before he got
wow.
that out to market. Yeah. So he was the one that sort of really led the charge to commercialize it.
Exactly, exactly. You know, and I want to talk really quickly. There's a culture of silence. We call it the Cassandra culture. Cassandra was from Greek mythology, and it's an environment basically in which speaking up is belittled and warnings go unheeded, especially when speaking up entails drawing attention to unpleasant outcomes, as was the case in the Cassandra and her prediction of war. And it was easy for others to not listen or believe her. So a culture of silence is not only one that inhibits speaking up, but one in which people fail to listen thoughtfully, thoroughly to those who do speak up, especially when they are bringing up unpleasant news. There's another example. You might have heard of Dieselgate, and this involved Volkswagen. When the CEO of Volkswagen, who was evidently a tyrant, there were stories of him banging the conference room table, and literally the fruit on the bowl would fly out of the table. He would bang it so hard. He wanted to be the #1 auto company in America, and he saw his avenue was creating a diesel Jetta, and he demanded in order to overtake the American automotive market, it needed to have high performance, low fuel consumption, very little, very clean burning diesel, and the engineers couldn't figure it out. They couldn't do it. But they're so afraid of this leader that they actually went in and tweaked the software on the car that when 2 wheels were spinning, when it was being tested, right, the performance did decrease, fuel consumption did decrease, and the pollution or the output was cleaner. But then they realized that it wouldn't have the performance that people would insist upon, especially in America. So when all 4 wheels were spinning, the pollution rate or the output went way up, and gas mileage went way down, and performance did go up. Well, it wasn't found until sometime later on, where a third-party company was studying diesel engines, that they reported that everything that Volkswagen was saying was untrue. They were basically lying, and out of that, they lost like 50% market share out of that. It was a terrible situation, but that was a culture of silence. Those engineers did not feel comfortable saying, we can't do this. We don't have the technology today to do this. So
there's a lot of examples of that. You're talking about the dangerous silence part, that there's a term that we've been talking about, Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, where he talks about ethical fading. And it's the same thing where all these, like what happened at Wells Fargo, and I think it becomes this king versus peasant sort of type situation where it is, you just sort of go along to get along.
Yep. And that Wells Fargo story is another great case study in psychological safety. There's another one with Nokia where the engineers failed to report. They knew that what they were developing would get wiped out by Apple. But because they had a tyrant leader as well, tyrannical leader, they didn't report it. They kept on innovating, and they lost like 70% market share. And ultimately that unit was disbanded and sold to Microsoft. It had failed so miserably. So this is the whole world of dangerous silence.
Right.
Yeah, where people see something unsafe or wrong, and they fear reporting it. People feel bullied and intimidated by someone, but does not report it. Fear of speaking up can be hazardous to human health, and this can lead to widespread frustrations, anxiety, depressions, and even physical harm. And I would assert that right now, psychological safety is so important on teams, especially with COVID and the environment that we're working in. And this is, we're talking earlier about what managers need to do and think about, and creating a psychologically safe environment is paramount right now.
And for some of the people who were not who didn't join us early, we were rapping about this study that's been done. About 58% of employees report increased burnout since May as a result of just trying to juggle, the home life, the work life, the school life of kids is all just mushed together now.
Yeah.
And this is the antidote to that, is to be, it's going to lead to that fourth bullet, the anxiety, the depression, all of that is escalating.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and jumping back just for a moment to ski patrol days, there were 3 teams that ran this particular mountain, and we worked on the weekends. And I'm not bragging, but I'm just telling you the way it was. My team was the most popular team. Everybody wanted to be on my team. And there was a reason, as that I was not a command and control leader of the ski patrol. And we had 3 peaks in the patrol room, and I put people in charge and said, you guys work out schedules, you work with people, and they just took it on. And so they were empowered, and they empowered everybody else. We were a volunteer ski patrol, so people joined the ski patrol because they could ski. Well, we got so busy at this mountain that we weren't able to ski while we were patrolling most days. But we still had to keep that environment of safety, psychological safety. And this is before I even knew what that term wasn't even invented yet.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even trained in coaching or high performance teams. But I just saw it as a natural way to build a high performance team. And we had 40 people on each weekend, and there was a lot of things going on. So that's how we, I look back at it and say that, I was able to do that back then.
That it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because I had a similar experience early on in my career when I was doing management in a small business, and there was maybe 20 employees, a total of us, that were running this company. And I had this instinct, just like you were talking about, that people, if they had a voice, they'd be more committed.
Yep.
And I used to use this story about how it felt to me like we could sit around for 2 hours and talk about the color of the Christmas party napkins. And it just got to a point where it was super arduous to actually involve people in these kind of conversations. So there's a skill to it too, of not having it become this rolling snowball of every single thought,
right,
and idea and challenge is relevant.
Absolutely.
You'll speak to some about that, because there is I think a tipping point, or a point of diminishing return on the conversational element to this.
Yeah, say more about that.
Yeah, so the example I gave was literal. We literally spent 2 hours debating the color of the Christmas party napkins, and I'm like, we had really important business topics to discuss, but I didn't have at that point in my career the skills to
I see.
to sort of make sure, hey, I think we've covered off on this, let's make a decision and move on. Because I was so, at that point, really tuned to wanting to make sure people felt, I guess, just what you said, I didn't know psychological safety as a term, but that was what I was going for. And so then it created a lot of that type of, that's.
Yeah, on the board, I took over as president in June. And I've worked very hard from then until now to create a psychologically safe environment. And Lisa, sometimes it's not very pleasant because I have board members challenging me, right? And I have to, and I feel, this is where emotional intelligence comes in, right? I feel that feeling of, who the hell are you? I'm president. Be quiet. Come up. Right? That comes up. It's there, right? It's there.
Okay.
And I immediately recognize that if I want to create a high performance board, then I need to engage my emotional intelligence, get that complete, and move on, create psychological safety. And most of the time when somebody challenges me or brings something up that maybe I don't want to hear, it's actually the best thing for the board. We executed on it. So I had to put my ego aside, right? We say high performance leaders check their ego at the door, right? And listen to what my board has to say, right? And so, in fact, one case in point, the woman who, one person on the board kept on emailing me to approve things that she was doing. And I was saying, yes, this is good, yes. And I said, no, this isn't working for me anymore. I want this person to take on their role. So I started responding this way. Well, what do you think about this? What does your instincts tell you? Tell me why you want to do this. And I would typically respond with, your instincts are spot on. You got this. You know this. Well, what's happened over in a very short period of time is that this person's now really owned her accountability and only comes to me when they really need my input on something. But that's high performance, right? I mean, I was answering dozens of emails all the time, and now I get very few emails. In fact, they're telling me what they need from me. You know, Robert, we need you to produce a video for our next meeting. Okay, I'll get it done, right? You know, they're pushing me, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's awesome.
There's a skill involved to this because that I didn't have in those days. That's for sure.
Well, of course not. It's not normal. You know, most of us. This is a whole different subject, but when you look at emotional intelligence, we experience key moments through one of four paradigms, and the default paradigm is fear, right? And so in that moment when I had that feeling like, be quiet, right? The fear was coming up because I don't want people to see me as an incompetent leader.
Yeah.
Right. But I knew that if I demonstrated, if I walked the walk of psychological safety and emotional intelligence, and check my ego at the door, that the results would be much better, much better. Yeah. And not only that, as a leader, I have to work less. Right. And the board is highly engaged now. Like they've taken it on, they're engaged. And, you know, and that's why what happened, I shared that situation that happened earlier on last week, why it was so, when I realized that psychological safety was impacted, why it's so important for me to take this on head on and deal with it. And, you know, we'll know more next couple of weeks, you know, what the damage was, if there still is any damage. But I'm committed. I'm absolutely 100% committed that that this board, that we'll work through this, you know, through interventions, through some training and conversation.
And sometimes the makeup of the team has to change as a result.
You know, what's from good to great, make sure you have the right people on the bus. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes you do need to let go of people. And I've coached my clients in that as well too, that you have somebody who was not willing to grow. I've coached people that were the detractor on teams and turned them around to be, you know, to be more involved and contribute and not be so negative all the time. But there are times where you have to let, you know, in this situation, if one team member was detracting from the whole board and we couldn't turn it around, then I would ask that team member to resign, right? Because the potential, I'm not saying it would be, but the potential was so great at breaking down trust, you know, in this particular work environment. By the way, he totally took it on. This guy totally took it on. He's made amends, and I'm just thrilled with what's happened with it. So I want to just talk about, you know, Google. Google did a huge study, and they found out that psychological safety was the #1 predictor of team effectiveness. And they studied 180 teams. Their project was called Aristotle, and they concluded that it wasn't enough just to have A players on your team. You need to have a team of people with A players that all work together. And the only access to that, or one of the only access to that, is to create psychologically safe teams. They also found that is to create innovation. So going back to the Blockbuster study, you can look at Uber and taxi cabs, you can look at Airbnb and hotels. All these companies innovated. They looked at what was wrong and they innovated. They thought outside the box. They created things that didn't exist before. So this is where value creation comes into play. So the question is, how do we measure psychological safety? How do you look at your team and identify whether or not psychological safety exists or doesn't exist? So again, team psychological safety is defined as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for taking interpersonal risks, interpersonal risk taking. So we're going to look at how we measure the cohesion or the psychological safety of a team. Amy Edmondson, the professor I mentioned earlier, who is now our mentor, our cohort, she's our mentor. She developed 7 simple but very powerful questions.
I'm getting my pen out. Hang on.
Say again?
You don't have to hang on. I said, I'm getting my pen out. I want to write these
Oh,
down.
okay. I'll show the slides. It's fine. 7 simple questions. Okay, and I'm going to go over the questions. And then I'm going to show you a couple of reports, what the questions look like. So this assessment is obviously done via email. It is advised that the team members, that you don't give it more than 10 to 12 people on a team. If you have a larger team, then we'll make that happen. And the assessment is actually designed to be given multiple times over a period of time so we can measure the success. So here are the 7 questions, and it's on a Likert scale. Number 1, if you make a mistake on this team, it is often held against you. And the team member will say strongly disagree up to strongly agree. Team members are able to bring up problems and tough issues. People on this team sometimes reject others for being different. Talk about diversity and inclusion, big go. It is safe to take a risk on this team. It is difficult to ask other team members for help. Number 6, no one on this team would deliberately act in a way that would undermine my efforts. And number 7, working with team members of this team, my unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. So I'm going to show you not the reports for all 7 areas, just a couple of them, but I want to show you the main report that comes out. That's the overview. So you can see up on top here, it says the medium psychological safety index, PSI, of this group is 80 out of 100, with the lowest score being 78 and the highest being 100. So this does imply that the team is psychologically safe. It's got a high degree of it. You see over here, you see an orange box with 4 smaller boxes in a line. And this basically shows you the line through the box second from the left shows you the median of where the team scored. But still, this is the average and this is the outliers. So now let's break down 3 of the reports just to see the differences. Oh, by the way, you see over here, I mean, we blocked out the names for obvious reasons. And in fact, when we give this assessment to a team, the leader of the team has to agree and that I will not share the names of the people, share the results with the names. I will block out the names and they have to agree to that.
That anonymity is so important. We were just talking about that in the chat, how people really do feel sure that they're going to be identified in these types of assessments. And that's a true sign right there of lack of psychological safety. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that has to be, I mean, that has to be so clearly stated, no compromise whatsoever on that, none. If they don't agree to that, then I won't give them the assessment. So, and I won't bring them on as a client. So you can see here that these are the individual scores over here. So now let's look at the results from willingness to help. So you see the scores here, and here they scored about 85% or so, 90%, and there were 2 outliers that were not part of the average group. Now this just informs us that, okay, this team is, the willingness to help on this team is high. We may or may not want to focus on an intervention here, or we may want to incorporate this into an overall intervention or development program. Now, diversity and inclusion, you know, there were a few people that were very high, but most people scored down here. Still, this indicates that the team members are aligned with their perception of inclusion and diversity. So this is good. Attitude towards risk and failure. Now we see it spreading out more. Right now we have some people that are scoring as low as 64, right, which is right here, and others are scoring 100. So now this would tell me that this is an area that we need to focus on this team. It's still not bad. It's not bad, but there's improvement available here. Now this one shows even a greater spread. So we know that we have an outlier here who scored 14, and we actually have people that are 100. So this tells me that in terms of having open conversations, this is where we really need to focus on our work. And this is where we might suggest developing their team members and their leaders in coaching conversations, for example. We probably do some development around self-mastery and emotional intelligence. So then based on this, this is how we would organize a solution. We would first do the assessment, and then we would do the coaching or interventions through the process, and you'll see that there's these check-ins along the way. So we would administer the psychological safety assessment at the beginning, and then as we move through the process, it can be every month, it could be whatever period of time. We do not recommend giving it weekly or even every 2 weeks. Every month is the minimum, depending on the length of the engagement. So now we can actually measure what's happening and are we moving the marker. So I'm just coming up to I'm sort of beginning to wrap the presentation. I have a few more slides. When you look at 3 core strategies to improve psychological safety, is we really want to focus on learning, not just the results. To create an environment of learning where when people make a mistake, we turn that into a learning process, right? We don't just reprimand or tell them they screwed up. We put on the coaching hat and we say, so what went wrong? What do you think you could have done better? What would you do differently next time? Why do you think this happened, right? And you coach them and let them analyze what happened, and then they help them develop a program to improve in the areas where they made a mistake. So Bear Bryant said, when you make a mistake, there are only 3 things you should do about it: admit it, learn from it, and don't repeat it. And developing people is one way not to repeat it. I love this quote that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's not thinking. Oh, I cut off part of the quote here. Oh, well, okay. Well, let me go back to this one. Let's realize that. So really, it's about leaders now acknowledging their own fallibility, that they don't understand something, that they need the input from the team, that they want that input. Real quick, I remember in my previous business, which we produced big events for companies with all the technology and creative work. I was very young in doing this, and we're doing an event, and there was a big problem with the installation, and we had to shift things around, and I didn't know really what to do. And so I asked the projectionist, who I never worked with before, what does he suggest? And he looked at me and he said, well, you're the producer, you tell me, and walked away, right? It is clear that individual did not work on any shows of mine in the future, right? Because he was unwilling to collaborate, but it's clear that he was treated poorly previously. Now, fast forward to the last big event I did in 2008. It was the most complex event. It was the biggest event, and I didn't know how to produce it. It was outside my comfort zone. So I hired 3 core people to help me run it, who were very experienced in doing big events. And one of them was the technical director, who said, if you really want me to own my area, right, then I want to hire my own team. And that was a gulp for me because I was used to hiring the team. So I said, okay, go ahead and hire your team. Well, it took us 3 days to set everything up in the room and do our rehearsals. And the day before we opened the doors, I was walking around the room, and the audio engineer came up to me and asked me if he could talk to me. And I said, sure, what's up? And he said, I want to tell you something. You're not an a-hole. He didn't say a-hole, he said the whole word. And I looked at him and I said, wow, do I need to be an a-hole? Because if I do, I can replace you. We have 24 hours. And he said, no. Most people like you are just complete and total jerks. But when I had a conflict with one of the other departments, you stepped in, you reminded us of the vision, you got the communication going between us, and then you stepped out and let us solve the problem. Okay, and by the way, it ended up being one of the best events ever produced by that company, and that company was Deloitte.
That just something, I wanted to bookmark about that, Robert, that, I think there's I remember this book and I'm just going to say the word, that called the no asshole rule, that was written by a professor at Stanford, that was about this idea. And I'm really struck by your, your story there, that term in people's mind isn't just about a person being a flaming jerk. It's not the Dilbert style leader. It's the person who doesn't care or listen.
Right.
That we sort of, and so it really strikes me that there's, I think, a broader perception in the mind of employees about what that actually means. And not that I want to get stuck on it, but I think that these are perfectly nice people in the real world at home, but it's just, or maybe they're not, but I'm saying, I think there is a way in which you get pegged when you don't listen or care.
Well, it's also what happens is that people put on a hat.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm the producer, and I've seen other producers be jerks, bark, yell, scream, insult to me, and fire people on the spot. And
exactly.
Right. So that changed. Now, I wasn't going to tell this, but I want to tell you another result from that event that happened. We had the opening of the show had cirque performers, and we had boxes with limiting beliefs stenciled on them. And beginning of the meeting, the CEO comes out of the box blows up with pyro and everything. He comes out. Well, it worked great during the dress rehearsal and during the fire marshal approval, but in the opening meeting, it didn't work. The box opened up because it was mechanical. Sound effects and lighting effects happened, but the fireworks did not go off. And in reality, out of the 800 people in the room, only about 15 people knew there were supposed to be fireworks. But nonetheless, I was really mad. And I sat in the back of the room, I folded my arms, and I said, damn it, see, you step out on the skinny branches and you fall and you fail. So I was really mad about this, really mad. And I stayed in the main room until the CEO finished his remarks. The meeting went on, and I went storming back to where the technical director was sitting. And I had fire coming out of my eyes. I was so pissed. And I noticed that the three leads were talking. And before I could utter a word, the creative director turned around and said, okay, Robert, we know the pyro failed. But look, this is what we did. In 20 minutes, these guys wrote a new ending to the event. They said, we're going to build the box again, and we're going to stencil on the beliefs, and we're going to go get a Wile E. Coyote plunger, and the CEO is going to come out and talk about the limiting beliefs. And his closing line is, we have to blow up conventional thinking, blow up the limitations, and he's going to plunge it, and all the boxes are going to blow up. I was blown away that they came up with that solution.
That's awesome.
Now we got the approval from the fire marshal. Well, so then when the meeting went to the break, I said, come on, guys, let's go tell the CEO this. So I walked up to him, and he's a guy about my height, looked at me, he goes, Grossman, what happened to my fireworks? And I said, Bill, it happens. Things happen. But listen to what, here's the operative word, listen to what my team came up with, right? And then I took a step back and said to the creative director, tell Bill the solution that you guys designed, okay? I didn't have to do that, right? I didn't have to do that. But let me tell you that those people were working overtime during this meeting when I did that. So I put my ego aside, I gave credit to the team. Now, what I realized in that moment too was that I hired that team. I didn't need to take ownership for the solution because I hired the right team. And that's really what he cared about. So it was a brilliant ending to a meeting. So the next question is, if you don't do something, what is the high cost of doing nothing? So that brings me to the end. I was going to talk about that we provide certain services, for senior leaders and high potential to be turned around and abrasive leaders and teams. But what I do want to make, I didn't talk to you guys about this, I hope it's okay. I actually want to make a complimentary offer that if anybody out there who leads a team or is part of a team, if you want to give a complimentary psychological safety assessment to your team, I will offer that for anybody on the call, and then we'll do a brief debrief after that. So.
Wow.
That's great. Thanks,
that's
Robert.
A really generous offer. That's awesome.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it. All your stories remind me of times. I was actually certified in something called Just Culture, and when you were talking about the healthcare examples, Just Culture was all about focusing on errors that happened, communication processes between the clinical staff and support staff, and it's just extremely important. So, for example, if a nurse was to put the wrong blood on the wrong patient, that can actually kill the patient.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
so it probably is a system process issue, not necessarily, maybe we didn't do enough training or have the support processes all around it.
Right.
So, you know, and then also physicians oftentimes get frustrated, yell, scream at nursing staff, which ultimately is going to create errors.
Right.
So this
And-
is life
and-
or death in healthcare.
Life and death in healthcare. It's life and death at work.
Yeah.
Because you know, people that are in an unpsychologically safe environment, they get depressed, they may get violent, they may act out. You know, there's a case study that I quoted an article that you guys are going to publish next month about the situation at Buffalo Bills, where there was a racial incident there.
Yep.
And you know, and that clearly happened because the worker was not psychologically safe to really do what was right. So she did really the wrong thing, and her manager also did the wrong thing because they were abiding by, you know, certain rules. They you know, I don't go the whole thing, you can read about it, but that's an example where they got majorly sued for discrimination
Yeah.
Oh,
because of that.
horrible. Hey, Sam, are we doing a poll today?
Oh,
You
yeah,
just
I just launched it.
Oh, okay.
So if anybody wants to take Robert's assessment, just go ahead and just set up some time with Robert there, and then we can make that happen. We'll if in case
It's for a team. It's not an individual. It's for a team. So
right.
Yeah.
So do
thank you
participants
so
need to click
much.
on the poll, Sam?
Oh, I think it's up, isn't it?
Is
So-
that-
There.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I launched it. Right,
Well,
and then also it does show the TMA assessment. If anybody in our audience hasn't taken the assessment yet and they'd like to take the assessment and have a free access to the portal for the year, please just contact me with this information here, and then I'll set you up. Or you just ask on the TMA assessment in the poll right there. We'll get you going.
What a great discussion today. Wow, I'm just taking away so many aha moments, and really appreciate I really like the whole idea, Sam, you were speaking about ensuring that those compensation strategies stimulate desired behaviors versus entitlement. And, you know, Robert, there was just so much there. I was really trying to scramble to write those questions down because they are so powerful. And I think I've used versions of them without even, you know, realizing that there was a formal way to do it. So for those of you who are interested in kind of having those notes with a recording and a link to the PowerPoint Robert used today, as well as Sam, will be emailed to all registered attendees.
By the way, in fact, I've mentioned those 7 questions are in the public domain.
Okay.
It's not part of an assessment platform that does the calculations for the team.
Okay. Very good. We'll still mail you the PowerPoint and you had such great stuff. And if you found today's forum valuable, just pass the word to your colleagues about this free weekly forum and how we are helping grow resilient leadership. Next week's forum topics are developing competencies and coaching for competencies, and innovative methods for creating career architectures. So be sure and watch for the invite to join us then. Spread the word on social media. We really appreciate it. Anything else team wants to say before we close today?
It was great. That was a great discussion. Thank you so much, Robert. That was
Thank you.
very helpful.
Appreciate you so much. Everybody, we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great, amazing, psychologically safe week
Right.
at work.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you, Robert.
Bye.
Thank you guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.